All right, YouTube, the EU does undermine national sovereignty. It's been that way for quite some time. Most people, if they are wise, if they're trying to get somebody to do something, they offer the carrot before the stick. That is, you don't immediately start threatening and harassing somebody into doing what you want them to do. You try at first to sweeten the deal at least a little bit so that, hopefully it gives them the opportunity to jump on board voluntarily. There's no animosity. You're absolved of part of the blame if things go wrong and so forth. But in Merkel's EU, because let's face it, it's essentially run by Angela Merkel, the fear of the new European Fourth Reich, only this time, oddly enough, a Marxist Reich. Merkel and others who want, basically a lack of border control are threatening to fine other nations that do not take refugees. That is, you can pay to, if you don't want to accept refugees, you pay a certain fine per refugee that you're turning back. Now, because of the porous border situation, the situation's all fucked up anyway. Like, you don't even need this at this point, because if Germany and France and the UK and some of these other nations have essentially open borders, those refugees can always march across because of the way the borders in Europe work. They can just march to some other nation. Now, this is obviously a direct attack upon groups that are in like Poland, Hungary, some of the political parties in Denmark, even like Front National, in order to get them to comply with the EU's own rules. So you don't really need any more evidence that the EU destroys national sovereignty, because now you've got a post-national governing authority, essentially run by a handful of national figures, saying that any nation that doesn't toe the line, it's not just a currency union, it's not just a trading bloc anymore, it's you will either take refugees in or we will make you economically suffer. Arguably, though, the fine is cheaper in some respects than actually taking the refugees, but are you going to get fined every year because the EU decides that you need more diversity? Where exactly does it end? I have to hazard a guess that this is going to bode well for those political parties that oppose the EU. You would think of the out of the EU movement in the UK. That is, the Brexit vote is coming up. I would assume that this would be a bit of support, actually, for those within the UK who are tired of the EU. They're tired of dealing with it. They don't really want to be told what to do within their borders, because that wasn't originally the intent, so to speak, of the EU in the first place. Nationalists in Poland and in France, Denmark, and elsewhere, they are becoming more numerous. I made a video on the Soldiers of Odin. There's a reason why groups like that are growing. The problem is, whether you agree with such a group or not, you can't remain blind to why they are prospering in the first place. Much like with the Weimar era of pre-World War II Germany, people in positions of power showed a callousness, an absolute lack of respect for the masses, an absolute incapability of understanding why they were pissed off. That's why the Nazi Party grew. That's why communism became larger. That's why fringe movements all across the spectrum in many parts of Europe gained so much dominance at the time. It wasn't a case of, well, horrible, evil bigots within our country are trying to take over and make like Nazi land or something. It was that they organized in such a way because they felt hopeless, they felt alienated, they felt like their national sovereignty had been violated, and you're going to get the same result from the same sort of actions. The economic situation of the world is oddly enough akin to sort of the 30s era as well in some ways. Productivity is slacking off, you have recessions everywhere, little pits of growth exist in this vast wasteland of stagnancy. And so the EU is no longer working. The US government right now, for example, I'll point this out. See, it's not just one side of the pond or the other this time. Here in the United States, years ago, the Republicans, the Democrats were already seen as out of touch because Obama was basically another Bush. The Republicans offered nothing in the way of reform. They fielded a neocon Zionist globalist candidate who couldn't win anyway, and people were pissed off. both parties actively suppressed reform movements from within their own ranks, and they're still doing so. So now the Republicans, especially, they denied a libertarian reform movement and disenfranchised tens of millions of people in the process. As a result of their actions, and as a result of their attempt to fix their own primary system, and by fix I mean rig, not fix as in make it work better, because it certainly doesn't, it's more arcane than ever now. Because of that, you have the rise of nativism and populism in the Republican Party. It's now Trump's party, essentially. The Paul Ryans and the Mitch McConnells, they no longer matter. They're no longer in control of the GOP. They don't have the popular opinion necessary to be in control of the GOP. Millions of people are flocking over to support what is essentially a slightly nativistic populist platform, which is closer to like the Goldwater era or something. They're taking it back to the 50s and 60s Republican Party. Arguably better, but, make no mistake, it's a paradigm shift. On the other side, the Democrats are being inundated by young liberals who call themselves socialists, even though some of them don't even like socialism. They feel positively about the term and don't even know what it means, just like some critics of socialism don't know what it means. I'll admit that. In Europe, you have the rise of nativists. You also have the rise of cultural Marxists who think you need more immigrants, who think you need more open borders. There is a sense of permeating malaise that wafts across Europe like a plague-era miasmus right now. And the people in charge don't even care. They don't care about their own people. And it doesn't matter if you ask the left or the right. In Europe, it doesn't matter whether you ask the left or right in the United States, because the malaise is all-encompassing at this point. You go to Japan, it's going to be the same story. You go to many parts of this world, and you ask people if they have any trust in their own government whatsoever. Now, I wouldn't ever trust the government because I'm a libertarian, because I think trust in government's retarded. But generally, the masses they tolerate it at least. They're no longer doing that. They're jumping ship from established parties and established viewpoints. They are now increasingly finding those viewpoints inappropriate for the times we're living in. They find them suppressive. They find them stupid. They find them outright retarded. And so they're moving to new ideological viewpoints, to new parties, to new paradigms, or they're abandoning, the political scene altogether, or they're endorsing some fringe movement, Fourth Reich now, or we need communism, or something like, or join the Green Party, something like that. The anarcho-primitivist wing of the Green Party. We need to live in tree houses or something. It's a social alienation, and the Merkels and the Camerons and the Hollands and all of these other people in Europe appear clueless. It's like when I look back at history, when I look at like the pre-World War II era, when things started to get dicey, and we're talking the infancy of the Nazi Party and of like the burgeoning communist movement in Germany and so forth. I look back and I think a lot of people do, where like, how the hell did people allow things to fester for so many years, cluelessly dragging their heels on actual reform, pretending to be doing something when they weren't, openly engaging in corruption at every possible level, suppressing freedom of expression and of idea. How did they do? How retarded could they be to do this for so long? But then I look at the modern era and I see the exact same thing happening in more countries than it ever happened in the interwar period between the Great War and like the World War. The original titles for them. Now we call them World War I, World War II. It's the same situation. You have the same alienation. You have the same rise of a far left and a nationalist, like Volkish things. You have the same general situation. You have an alienation of the culture via immigrant. You have in the past, it was different European groups mixing. Now it's people from the third world, people from Africa, people from the Middle East or South Asia or something. But it's the same concept. It's exactly the same concept. You're going to have the exact same result. Fringe parties will continue to rise. Whether it's far left or far right makes very little difference, other than setting the stage for the military alliances you would expect to be in flux at the time that war breaks out. The problem is we won't survive the next world war. We won't. We won't survive World War III, most of us. Most of humanity will be vaporized in atomic war. Most of the rest will be destroyed by radioactive fallout, famine, and epidemic thereafter. So, when these idiots in Europe that are so-called leaders of these nations are completely ignoring the feeling of the people, whether you believe in it or not, it doesn't matter whether you believe in some objective sense. Yes, mass immigration is great for us, or yes, mass immigration is stupid. It doesn't matter what you believe, unless you happen to be residing in each of these specific nations. What matters is the prevailing beliefs of the populace empowered to change their government therein. Because at any time, we may look at this as far off, or it could never happen in the modern age. They have drones now, they have tanks now, and it'll never happen. People will never rise up and overthrow a first world government. Yeah, they will. Absolutely, they fucking will. And I see it happening not too far on our horizon if things keep going the way that they're going. It almost doesn't matter as well, I will tell you this. Here's the real problem. It doesn't even matter if you reform the system through nativism or through trying to enforce multiculturalism, because either way you do it, if things don't drastically improve in a relatively short period of time, the prevailing wisdom of the population will be, look, they've screwed us again, and social alienation continues to increase. That is, even where it's completely out of the hands of those same individuals that are corrupt to begin with and causing the origins of such a problem, they still get the blame for it, even undeservedly. Sometimes it's not even their fault. Sometimes you have a drought and you don't have enough bread. You don't have as much beer. Sometimes the vineyards wilt and get diseased. Sometimes you have the cattle start dying off. The mine runs out of salt or something like that. That's kind of out of their hands. The fisheries dried up. We've had weird weather patterns. We can't fucking do anything about it. They still get blamed. In the modern era, it's even easier. You have so many conspiracy theories about globalism and FEMA and concentrate, martial law, chemtrails, the Illuminati 666 sort of stuff, that even mundane natural disasters like the Canadian wildfire get blamed on some sort of human cause. And so there's even more blame to go around. Social alienation's arguably higher now simply because people can reach out and talk to one another over long distances instantly and fairly inexpensively now as compared to even a decade ago or something like that. The social alienation in Europe, I think, is a problem for the EU, for its sort of post-national governing authority to alienate parts of the population in most of Europe by attempting to fine people and thus giving credence to those who say the EU destroys national sovereignty, like those who want a Brexit in the UK, nationalists in Poland, whoever they may be. That's the worst possible thing that they could do. It would be better to very quietly pay off the Turks, to take these refugees, settle them in what is currently Kurdistan, kill two birds with one stone, overwhelm the Kurds with millions of migrants or something. That could be done. It would be cheaper. It would cause social alienation to decrease. Ultimately, it would be a better idea. But they're not going to do that because they're stupid. They're just as stupid as people back in the 1930s who didn't see what was coming. They had no idea what was happening. They said, oh, well, the masses are upset. I wonder why. Let's commission a 2-year, $10 million study of why the masses are angry. Could it be lack of work? Could it be lack of beer? Maybe we have to get them drunker. Well, that's sort of what Hitler did. Where did he first go? He went to the beer halls to talk to the lower classes. He didn't go talk to the intelligentsia. He realized he needed strong-arm individuals. Who did the communists appeal to? Oh, the masses, the little people, the working class, factory worker, farmer, something like that, someone who works in a mine. That's how these movements start. They don't start from the top down. They don't start because some grand council of oligarchs decides we should have a political referendum, a political reform movement, and then they try to implement it because they always fail. It never works unless it's an out-and-out revolution like United States in its infancy, or the French Revolution or something. Even then, things usually fall to shit after anyway. Look at we don't have any respect for our Constitution anymore. So yeah, Europe is stupid, specifically the governing authorities of the EU. They're retarded. Obviously, none of them were history majors because they would know specifically what is being led up to by their actions. That's about all. Peace out.